I don't know how anyone makes money. I honestly worry about that for people every day. I'll see someone and I'll be like, I don't know how you're going to do it. I mean, there's a $45,000 signing bonus to join ICE. So, and the economy is so bad, you think about it. Could I rip a family apart for $30,000 after tax? Could I do unspeakable evil for so little? But the only plus side to that is the evils are unspeakable, so you wouldn't tell anybody. You wouldn't talk, oh, what do you do? Oh, it's actually unspeakable. I cannot talk about it.
That was comedian Gavin Matts performing at Union Hall in Brooklyn a few months ago. I saw that set live. And to be honest, I wasn't in the mood to laugh. But I had plans with friends, so dragged myself to the show. His ability to make horrors hilarious made me laugh when all I wanted to do was cry. And I was surprised to hear a stand-up use his working classness as part of his act. I was moved by it. The anxieties, terror, and troubles that had been circulating through this podcast, the news, my personal life, and the lives of people around me were being said out loud on stage. And we were suddenly, collectively, able to process things that were crushing in the day-to-day. Late-night political comedy has had a huge uptick over the last 2 decades as our political system has gotten increasingly turbulent and ridiculous. Comedy that has to do with race and gender have become fixtures in the entertainment landscape. So why did hearing a comic talk about class issues feel so new? Could humor be the best way to talk about the class divide? Welcome to Shifting Terrain. I'm Rachel Rybacek, a working-class sociologist who spent a long time thinking about class and race. I'm having conversations with experts and everyday people to amplify the cultural and political issues both capturing and dividing America's working class today. I'll get back to Gavin later on in this episode, along with a professor and writer who gets to the heart of how comedy can be transformative for more than just the person laughing. But first, I'm talking with Kenice Mobley, a New York City-based stand-up comic. She's been featured as one of Vulture's Comedians You Should and Will Know, and made her late-night debut on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon.
I just got back from the airport, and I saw my favorite thing there. It's guys traveling back from having had hair transplant surgery. Have you seen this? Dudes in like the full, yes, head wrap, usually from Turkey, yes. 100%, no, because, okay, like women, we can go to like the Dominican Republic, and we can get fake tits, an ass, come back and find a husband. But men, they go to Turkey, they get their new hairline, they come back, and they find out that wasn't the problem. And it makes me feel so good. It makes me feel so good.
Can you describe the kind of comedy you do for people who may not be familiar with your work?
Sure, and that will be most people because I am not famous, so...
But should be.
Thank you very much. I'm a stand-up comedian, and my jokes are often silly, dirty, and somewhat political, definitely from a leftist middle to working class perspective. I'm really going for making people smile and being silly.
So you mentioned maybe not a lot of people know me because I'm not famous. And I think right now there's a conversation across a lot of sectors where it's like, especially with social media, do you do the bit that's going to get you clicks? Or do you have integrity? Not to say the bit's getting clicks. Those people don't have integrity, but maybe.
For me, it's what I can do versus what I can't do. So I am a Black woman with natural hair who has like not, my features are not ambiguous. Like a lot of people are casting like racially ambiguous. There's nothing ambiguous. I'm a Black woman. And different markers indicate me as someone who's not a rich Black woman. My teeth are my teeth. They're not fancy teeth. They're not new teeth. I wear glasses. I have clothes that I get at clothing swaps. So people, when they see me, there is information they will and won't accept from me. And when I first started, I did try to go for what's the funniest thing, because I was taught comedically, funny is funny. And so I ended up doing these jokes that were almost like selling myself out for the purpose of humor, making people comfortable who weren't interested in accepting a woman, a lower class black woman, a darker skinned black woman. And I ended up feeling kind of bad, like making jokes at my expense. But when I talked about the things that didn't make me feel bad, when I talked about things that were real to my experience, the people who I want to respond well responded well to that. And so that informed it. Just if I'm going to be myself, I don't have the option of just going for the easiest, cheapest laugh because people don't buy that from me. They're like, no, we have eyes. We see you. That's not real.
I saw you do a set recently at a show specifically geared toward unemployment. You had done some jokes there that really track with the experience of being working class about clothing and getting clothing at a clothing swap. But there is also in lefty communities this sort of guilt that drives people to try to pass as working class.
It is very easy to pretend to just be very leftist and eco-conscious when you are just poor. Like that is, oh wow, I care about the environment so much. I only get my clothes at clothing swaps. I care about the environment so much. I don't take cars. I take public transportation. And it's like, okay, all this is because I can't afford to take an Uber every time I want to take an Uber. And I used to try to buy new clothes, and that would mean I get one shirt versus getting like a wardrobe that I can get through thrift shopping. And now it's really clothing swaps. And my friends, they do think, wow, it's such a great thing that you do for the community. Because when I do these clothing swaps, it is like 100 women, usually related to comedy in some way. And I make sure to always invite certain rich people that I know so that like fancier clothes are coming into this cycle of clothing. The clothes trickle down to me. And by going on my neighborhood buy nothing group and getting nice things, it's like, I don't believe in trickle down economics, but I do believe in me getting good free things from the rich people who live around me, and I want them. So give them to me.
Absolutely. Rich people, go put your things on the buy nothing groups.
Yes.
What are the kind of class issues or class contours within comedy?
It's definitely different between like when you're starting out and when you've been doing it for a long time. This is my 12th year of doing comedy. I should, of course, be further along than I am. So when I was starting out, it was a lot of people who had really stable jobs or their parents were paying for them. And their jokes would kind of reflect that. So they'd be like, ugh, when your mom wants to take you on a vacation to Europe, ugh. And you're like, okay, what? Sure. But now, as I am further along and I get to see people who are more established or who are more successful, they're downplaying a little bit. So it's not like, woe is me, this very privileged thing. They will say the right liberal stuff. But when you look into it, oh, you haven't had to have a day job while you're pursuing this. You haven't had to support yourself, and therefore you have to make sacrifices because you simply don't have the energy to be at a show every night, running around, going to the social things that get you those connections while maintaining a day job. You haven't had to do that. And it is very frustrating. And some people are like, you're just jealous. Okay, maybe. But if I put my heart into something, which I did a show called The Hawkeye Draft, which is really important to me. But I can't afford to hire a publicist to make sure that the New York Times covers my first show. And you're like, oh, this person who's been able to have a press agent since they were in their third year of comedy, oh, their outcomes are very different than mine. And I have to say, okay, I can't change that. It'd be nice to have that, but I'm just going to have to keep making things and trying things. And ideally something will work out, but why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I like to do this. And this is how I express myself. I need to focus on my why instead of, oh, wow, look at all these other people who are so much more successful at it based on where they started.
There's this idea in the United States, if you work hard, you'll get ahead. And one way people talk about it is meritocracy, your merit. The merit of your work, the merit of your effort, like that will get you success, money, fame, upward mobility. And I think a lot of people don't understand you have to pay for an agent, and a particular kind of agent, an agent who has certain connections, and they cost more.
Not just anyone who says they're an agent. You have to have a good agent, and they're going to take a certain percent, and a manager, and they're going to take a certain percent, and a lawyer who's going to take a certain percent.
Yeah, I think it's so deceptive, particularly in this phase of our social media time. Oh, just make something really funny and it will go viral.
I love what you say about meritocracy, just because in comedy it is, people are like, oh, funny is funny, and that's what rises to the top. And it just so happens to be that thin, young, white, middle to upper middle class people are more successful at this because they're better at it. It's like it's not that people have their own implicit biases, and the people who are booking have these, the people who are watching things have these, and the systems that they're watching it on have these. It's not that. It's just that you're not funny enough. And that sits like a stone on the back of everyone who's not. So, like, if you're working class, stone on your back. If you are differently bodied, if you're not traditionally attractive, stone on your back, and it's your fault. That seems to be like such a big part of America. Like, hey, if you don't have, that's because you fucked up and you made the mistake of being born differently. And that was a disastrous mistake on your part.
Something I think about comedians, or I observe, is that unlike other performers, comics are doing sets and they're adjusting them, tweaking them as they travel the country based on how people are responding. And so I think comics have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in culture, the economy, and politics way more than other performers. Do you agree with that? Do you see that? And is comedy reflecting what's happening right now? Because I think if it were, I'm surprised there aren't more people talking about class.
I talk about class sometimes, not all the time. It is interesting to me that, well, in the way that, like, people don't talk about it politely, period. Like, I grew up in the South, Christian, moderately conservative, and that's one thing we never talked about. Talk about class. Excuse me? It's so rude. You never ask someone how much they make. You don't ask them how much their house costs. You don't ask them how on earth they got the money to do this thing. Like, no, you simply do not ask. And I think that there's so many layers, but I remember in the show that you're talking about, looking at someone and being like, I like your boots, you should participate. And I did that because that lady was dressed as though she had money. But even that, I remember that because it is not something I do very often, is call someone out like, you have money. I can see you have money. Yeah, I think we should do it more. But oh gosh, even thinking about it, I'm like, oh no. Like there's a little bit of tension in my body. Like,
Yeah, you're like clutching. You're
yes,
almost
I'm
if you have
clutching my
pearls.
pearls that I'm not wearing because I don't.
Yeah.
Who owns pearls? I would like to do it more. I am dealing with the same, probably, pearl clutching that a lot of comedians are dealing with. I think we should get over it because I am very comfortable making fun of men from the stage as a woman and a feminist. But yeah, class, I could call out more. Thank you.
You could, but what is the fear or worry about doing that?
Some of those people are the ones who hire me. I'm trying to think of the times that I've gotten like some big opportunity. It is usually from like a company like Netflix. I am probably less likely to fuck you, rich person, if I think that rich person may hire me and that may make it possible for me to pay my rent this month. And so I think that is part of why. But at the same time, you can talk about general trends without attacking a specific person. This is often my point of comparison in my head because of how I was raised. But to me, it is very silly that there are so many animal hospitals around Brooklyn that charge so much, and we are spending so much on pets when, like, kids can't eat. So, like, some of this is decision making and value stuff, but I could make fun of that more because, wow, my friends' dogs have better health insurance than I do, and I think that that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up such an important reason that a lot of us are hesitant, though, to call it out, is that the people with a lot of money have a lot of decision-making power about who gets an opportunity or not. That means not saying certain things unless, people think, let's pile on Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. Like, they're these villains.
We should make fun of those, but there's a safety in making fun of that level of rich versus the intermediate level of rich that is also taking up a lot of space and wealth and stuff. I am serious about these issues and I care about the advancement of our society as a thing that serves everyone, but mainly I'm going to talk about dicks and cum.
There's a place for all of it, I guess. You get him in with the cum and then you hit him with the class consciousness. Kenice described dynamics for comics whose identities aren't always top of the list for big-time clubs and streaming specials. And while there have been some shifts in the business, what does it really take to get traction in comedy these days? My next guest has a wide view of the industry that gives insight into where things are at and where they're headed. In addition to being the executive director of the Center for Media and Social Impact, Professor Caty Borum also co-founded the Yes and Laughter Lab, or YAL, a competitive incubation lab, pitch program, and festival that uplifts comedy writers and performers to ignite social change. Can you put into words what is so helpful about comedy and laughing, especially when crying is the more obvious choice?
Yes. Often comedy can be the only way we can talk about something, that we actually can bring something up and bring people along. A group of colleagues and I produced a documentary, 2-part series called Stand-Up Planet. And really we were looking at whether a sort of comedic romp through parts of the developing world to kind of follow the jokes into the insights of people's lives could actually be a way to get people to, A, want to pay attention to that, and B, travel along on a journey that was maybe less about empathy. And I'm a big fan of empathy, by the way, but I think sometimes empathy can feel like, I feel bad for you, but I'm glad I'm not you, versus an emotion that I like to talk about with comedy, which is, oh, wow, we are really all flawed in the same messy human ways. And I feel solidarity with you rather than a kind of pity. I actually turned to comedy in the first place because of your exact proposition, which is we can't get people to come to our sad TED Talks all the time about taboo and hard topics because they will opt out. But if we can get them in through comedy that punches up, we might have a chance. I love returning to two old white guys. Aristotle, who we think of as the first person that really, right? Really?
Very old white guy.
Very old. Yes. Aristotle is believed to be the first, if not one of the first philosophers to really write about comedy serving a societal function. And what that means is that comedy was not ever just there for us to be entertained as in the entertainment marketplace. It is serving a societal function in which something that is made fun of often is so grotesque and absurd and wrong that it deserves to be lampooned. And therefore it becomes a societal corrective, that comedy is the way we actually point out and correct something. And, many, many years later, Sigmund Freud wrote about comedy in his famous 1905 book, Jokes and the Unconscious. Freud believed if we hold on to taboo topics, that it's actually unhealthy psychologically, physically, all of those things. So comedy as a form of catharsis is so important when we think about dark and taboo topics.
I saw a comedian a couple of months ago doing stand-up about crushing debt. His and other people's, among other topics that would otherwise be very painful. Mm-hmm. And he managed to make me laugh about the very real dread many of us are living with The person set struck me for how it addressed class issues in particular, and I realized I rarely, if ever, hear that kind of content. So there are people talking about racial justice, which I've definitely heard more of in not only social justice aligned comedy, but in comedy generally in the United States for a very long time. And the class stuff, not so much. And it made me wonder, is comedy skewed more toward people with money?
Typically, the way that we encounter comedy as a cultural form is by the time it has already reached the entertainment marketplace in some way, right? If we are fortunate enough to live in a place that hosts comedians who come and perform live, and that is not true of many, many places in the United States, we're experiencing comedy when it's already a Netflix special or a sitcom on one of the broadcast networks or on streaming. So when we think about the norms of the entertainment industry and what it's programming, we're still swimming a little bit upstream in terms of seeing a full expanse of lived experiences in comedy in the entertainment industry. So the entertainment industry tends to, over the years, have favored material that it is seen over and over again. This is part of just how the industry is risk averse. It is a money-making industry. If you think about comedy and how it's made along the way, there's actually a ton of comedy that is talking about class issues. Comedy forever has been sort of very broad strokes, right? Like, I have a father-in-law. Do you have a father-in-law? What does he do? We're kind of past the point where those kinds of broad humor jokes are necessarily going to be interesting anymore. We are in a niche programming, narrow casting media climate, which means you do have to program comedians who have a level of specificity in their lived experiences. And if you think about whose lived experiences we traditionally haven't seen and heard from as much, it is women, people of color, the disability community, the queer community. And so we're really starting to see, for a while, this kind of breakthrough. And if you listen carefully to the stories of comedians who don't come necessarily from inherited wealth or a famous parent or whatever, there's a lot of social class material. Now, I would say that in my experience working with comedians who are doing that kind of comedy, they're not using the term social class. And so if we were to do some big, nerdy Google search, comedians and social class, we might not necessarily hear that, but we would find comedy about student debt. We'd find comedy about food deserts in an area that is attempting to be gentrified. I've heard really brilliant comedy about the rising cost of healthcare. So a lot of social class issues that come absolutely from the lived experiences of artists. I think it's actually a pretty exciting time to be paying attention to comedy that's really saying something about the world, including social class markers for sure.
I think that part of why I've been interested in foregrounding class over and over, I've seen the ways class gets absorbed into race, and that race is the stand-in for somebody's class position. And there are many, many, many times that people assumed I grew up upper middle class in the suburbs of Connecticut. And when I asked them why, because I'm white and I have nice teeth, and they're like, and you speak well. And it's the opposite. Single mom, immigrant, very poor, experienced homelessness, not having food, like so many things that they just cannot compute because I don't look the part as a white person. And I've also known a number of people of color who've resented being perceived as having come from or are working class or poor because they're a person of color, specifically Black people.
I couldn't agree more, Rachel. I think what you're talking about that's really important is the idea that no matter what, I'm going to see you as a white woman. I'm going to make all kinds of assumptions. And I agree with you that social class and how it behaves in our bodies and the way we move through the world, and we don't really talk about it very much. I actually teach a class on media representation and culture where we talk about social class in media. And one of the projects that we talk about is Judge Judy, which really is a show about an educated elite woman more or less chastising people who are lower socioeconomic status. But it's an interesting experience to guide students through that and help them to see, okay, let's talk about the assumptions that we've made. And then as a contrast, we look at Duck Dynasty. And if you know anything about that show, those guys are rich, guys that own a duck hunting company down in the Deep South, and they are quite wealthy, but they're leveraging the markers of middle working class, Deep South folks to kind of gain this cultural currency. And just to bring it back to comedy, I think maybe because of the kinds of comedians that we work with at Y'all and Y'all Comedy Fest, people that are really trying to access the entertainment industry and a comedy career without the born advantage of someone who works in Hollywood or a first generation college student, which is a huge social class marker. And so I think because of that, Rachel, we see a lot of social class material come through that comedy, because these are not the people that have the structural advantage or the, for lack of a different term, maybe the born demographic advantage. But I will say that when a topic comes up over and over and over again in the work that we do, we know that's kind of where the cultural zeitgeist is, and class markers for sure show up. It's just, they're not necessarily calling it that.
Yes, which I think what you just talked about, the ways people try to code switch around class. So I think there's a way that it can be clear, like, oh, this person they grew up poor. They grew up working class. They are working class.
I think what you're speaking to is authenticity.
Yes.
And part of what makes comedy persuasive, actually, is the degree to which we find that person authentic. And I think that you said something really meaningful, which is, as somebody who does have a very particular lived experience that informs how you move through the world and how you interpret it and see it and feel it, you can sniff out a lack of authenticity, but I bet you can also tell when someone might share some aspect of your own lived experience. And it's pretty obvious to those of us that do that work, that are dedicated to the sort of social potential of comedy. You can tell where the lived experiences are authentic. And so I find that work really, really meaningful and incredibly important. And I really am rooting for those folks to make it all the way to the bigger, broader stage of entertainment culture, so that we can be a bit more educated about what social class divides really mean in the United States, that it increasingly affects most Americans, because we're in this moment where wealth inequality continues to grow at such a grotesque level.
What is possible for comedians, as you see it, who are authentic, they're smart, they've got their finger on the pulse of what is really going on for people? What is in the way of them getting fame or a much bigger audience?
This is a capitalistic enterprise whose job is to make money. And so when we demonstrate that we can love a television show or a performer that is maybe doing something different and new that we haven't expected, that support is really meaningful, because the entertainment industry does what the audience wants. So if there is a demonstrated audience for a working class comedian or a comedian of color, or a woman or queer or trans, the industry starts to follow, which is part of how we think of our work at the Yes and Laughter Lab, is that over time, perhaps the marketplace for comedy can change if we can empower comedians to do their best work from their lived experiences, and that work gets to be expanded to more of us that maybe don't have access to going to a comedy show in some venue.
Caty talked about the catharsis of comedy, something I experienced while watching my final guest, who you heard at the very beginning of this episode. Gavin Matts is a comic that Vulture magazine listed in their Comedians You Should and Will Know feature, and whose one-hour special was called Dark Comedy at Its Best by New York Magazine. I was struck by your set a couple of months ago because it was hitting on class issues that I don't typically hear in comedy. And I don't know that you would think, oh, those were class issues, but that's how it hit me. But you were also doing jokes about the male loneliness epidemic.
The number one problem? Oh, man, male loneliness. We got to fix it. You know, they silenced us. And now we're so lonely. It's funny how that worked out. The cure for male loneliness is simple, though. You know, it's as simple as catching a T-shirt at a basketball game. That can change everything. The problem is people sit too high up. That's always where the shooters are. That's a joke about vantage points.
But there was also stuff about money. You were talking about debt. How are people surviving? And then you go into this thing about circumstances that basically push people to do unspeakable evil. And that ICE is offering people these signing bonuses, plus forgiving thousands of dollars in student loans. And while it's incredibly funny, it does speak to the desperation of poor people, working poor people, and working class people. So I found it very class aware and class conscious. Do you see it that way? And what inspired you to go down that road?
I mean, I do see it that way. I'm very thoughtful about what I'm trying to say, especially if something is a more edgy joke where there could be a perceived victim, which I try not to have one, in almost a punching up strategy where I would like to be more enlightening than darken or dampen a room, even though some of the material can be a little darker. But it just comes from a wanting to understand both sides. I look at things with nuance, and then I think that's how I'm able to like come up with the ICE joke, the unspeakable evils joke. But that is also like a joke where you're constantly hearing about unspeakable evils. So a lot of the things that I'm talking about are just kind of like, we should talk about this and this should be said out loud in a room. And that's in a way my activism for where I feel bad where there's lack thereof.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've definitely seen comedy that is social justice oriented. And it is so much more heavy-handed in a way that I think makes it funny for a small audience. Whereas my sense is that what you're doing has broader appeal.
I've done similar sets for like people that work in finance in the financial district of Manhattan, New York, and done well. I could do a set like that in the Midwest, in the Rust Belt, which I will. And that connects and people connect. It's not like heavy-handed. It's not shaming.
What are you seeing if you are, how class is playing out in circles you're in with other comics, in the kind of entertainment business broadly?
I mean, you probably tell if you're listening that I'm white, but I mean, the people that are getting ahead are, you know, white men. The people that are getting ahead are not, I would say, people of the arts. It's becoming like business-minded, ad-based, but I think more than ever in comedy, it is new. It does feel new for stand-up. Because in my mind, I'm like, stand-ups are people that have been sleeping on a couch for like 8 years. Somebody helped them out. They lived with like 5 people in a room, you know?
Yeah, that's my sense of how comedy has been. It's been a kind of like working class profession, working class craft, working class community that people really bust their ass. They sacrifice a lot because they're compelled to do it, and that they're not necessarily well funded or...
No, there's no art grants for stand-up. There's no union. There's kind of just go and do it and just commit your life to it.
And you said white men are getting ahead, but also white men with money.
Yeah, specifically, I would say like people that come from a rich background. Yeah. And then you find that out and you're like, you know, what can you do?
I also feel that way about politicians. you're trying to act like you're a working class and like a salt of the earth kind of guy, but actually you're not.
Yeah, it's you see people that wear like wrinkled t-shirts and you're like, it's not how they dress, you know what I mean? It's a lot of cosplay. I get why they do it. I get why they're embarrassed. There's even a thing where people own it, but I don't think that's any better. But I mean, I talk about this in therapy all the time where I'm just looking for something to be mad at or reasons to not like something else, so I don't have to think about myself at all. So I really struggle with it.
You struggle with what?
I struggle with the idea of, say, like a class above that is doing like the same thing as me and pursuing the arts. I let that affect me. It gets in your way. And then it becomes like this thing that you think about, and then it hurts you. But I didn't want to have that background, and I'm like happy to have come up the way I have. And I think that's like a special and unique way. But if you're constantly losing to somebody that is like advantaged, it can really drive you nuts. And I don't know if that's like bitterness or I don't know what that is, but it's just this thing where I'm talking about this like every week sometimes. And even that is almost worse than it happening. So the way that it brings you down, on top of it, also holding you back because they're getting ahead, it can be quite bothersome, especially if you're like somebody who only has this. Then you're constantly questioning if this is the thing that I was supposed to do. And maybe this isn't for somebody like me.
I'm nodding vigorously because I relate so much. I relate so much to everything you just said. And I also sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm also paying to talk to this person about my class rage.
Oh, I've had to cancel therapy sometimes because I was like, I just don't have the money this week, so I got to lie to Jess to make it so that like she thinks that I got something else going on.
I feel like we're soul sisters in a way around that. So thank you. And I won't compliment you because
Oh yeah, I told you not to.
Don't do that.
Yeah, do not support me.
We wondered if laughing about our painful fractures could unify the working class. What I'm finding is that it definitely allowed us to find some space from the raw edges of pain, rage, and insecurity. And in that space is actually connection with other people who can relate on some level. It's no longer a lonely place to be. It can even be fun. And for the people who don't have direct experience with catastrophic circumstances, financial uncertainty, tragic loss, and the many painful experiences of being alive, you can come closer to the reality through someone's funny take on suffering. So maybe comedy can be more effective than sad TED Talks or heavy-handed social media clips. Those haven't gotten us closer to a society and economy that works for the overwhelming majority. Dare I say, the working class majority. But who do we even mean when we say the working class? In the next episode, we talk with experts and everyday people to explore who or what the working class is today.
One of the things that is challenging about talking about class in the United States is that people who are actually part of the top 5 or 2% think of themselves as middle class. So I think it's very important for them to understand who is actually in the middle.
That's coming up on Shifting Terrain. Shifting Terrain was executive produced by Amanda Cowper and myself, Rachel Rybacek. Audio mixing by Tina Toby Mack. Thank you to our guests, Kenice Mobley, Caty Borum, and Gavin Matts. You can find us on Instagram at Shifting Terrain Podcast. Also, we'd love it if you'd rate, follow, and share the show.